Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to Fronteras, A Changing America. I'm Monica Ortiz Uribe. Maybe you've noticed lately that the sky's been a little hazy. That's because it's wildfire season, and the last 2 years in New Mexico have been particularly active. There's one burning right now in the Gila wilderness that's called the Silver Fire. It's about 100 square miles large, and it is burning fast and growing quickly in this hot, dry weather. My guest today knows all about wildfires. She is a lookout in the highest, most remote tower in the Gila wilderness, and she's often the first one to spot these fires. Welcome, Sara Irving.
Thank you for having me, Monica.
So I understand your job is really unlike any other job. Tell us about what you do.
Well, my main job is, of course, fire detection. I also do a lot with radio communication for firefighters who are in locations that they can't get radio communication out to the dispatch. So those are the main components of my job. The other part of my job is living in a very remote and place, a very primitive place.
Where is it? How do you get there?
Well, it's a 12-mile hike from the trailhead to my tower. It's in the middle of the Gila wilderness on the west side of the Gila wilderness. So it takes a while to get there.
How long?
Well, as I get older, it takes longer.
Yes.
But you know, anywhere from 6 to 8 hours to hike in.
And where do you start? Where does the trail start?
The trailhead is on what's known as the Bursum Road, which runs between basically Glenwood, starts in Glenwood and runs up through the little mining town of Mogollon and to Snow Lake and Willow Creek in that area of recreation areas in the forest. And so the trailhead's there. I park my truck there, and then I hoof it by foot.
And do you have to carry things up there?
Well, the Forest Service packs in all of our gear at the beginning of the season on mule.
On a mule?
Yeah, so there's a mule train that brings in all of the gear for the season, the food. We have 2 propane refrigerators up there, so we just stock them up, and when we run out, we run out. And you know, we have canned goods and all of that up there. And since I've been there for so many seasons, you know, a lot of the stuff I just leave up there.
Okay.
But if I go out on my days off and go to town and want something, yeah, the only way to get it in is on my back.
So pack it up. And so once you get there, describe what your tower looks like.
Well, my tower is actually a pretty nice one as lookout towers go. It's 14 by 14 square, which is large. And it has a catwalk, so I can go outside on the catwalk, and some lookout towers have catwalks and some don't. It's 30 feet tall. And
how many steps does it take to get to the top?
Oh, I don't know that. I'm terrible with numbers.
Never counted them.
There's three sections of stairs. Yeah, I know the windows. There's 52 windows because I have to clean those.
Yeah.
And it has a bed and a desk and a wood stove for heat and a propane stove for cooking and some storage, and then the fire finder right in the middle of the tower, which is standard for lookout towers. The fire finder's always in the center of the tower. And lookout towers are designed to be on the 4 cardinal directions, so my front door is due east. You know,
And so what do you see once you're up there? It's 11,000 feet in the air, is that correct?
Well, almost. It's 10,778 feet is the elevation, so close to 11,000. And I can see a long ways. I mean, depending on how clear it is, I see way into Arizona, of course, because I'm fairly near the state line in the western part of the state. and you know, I would say on a clear day, 100 miles any direction.
All around.
Yeah, I can see down into Mexico.
I see.
Yes.
And you get all sorts of seasons, no, out there? Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, because of its high elevation, of course, it's very different than here in Las Cruces. It's, you know, so much higher. Some years, we usually go in May, and some years are, the weather can be really nasty in May. I mean, it's early spring. Often the aspen haven't leafed out yet. We've had snowstorms in May. We've had snowstorms when I'm trying to hike in. So the weather in May is not very warm. It's usually in the 30s at night up there. And then our summer kind of starts early June. We finally start to get some warmer weather. And then in July we start to get, you know, the rainy season with all the thunder and lightning. And
does that get scary?
well, we're very safe up there. You know, the tower has a lightning rod, and so it's grounded, and so it's the safest place to be, actually. But yeah, it can get kind of intense. The electrical charge, if the tower gets hit directly, I can kind of tell. You get this sort of, your hair starts to stand up a little bit on your arms and the back of your neck, because it's this electrical charge, and then there's a loud crash and a loud flash, and so those direct hits are a little bit, even after all these years, are a little bit like, whoo, okay, but it's perfectly safe.
And you're up there all alone, correct? For how many days, and what's that like?
Well, I work with another person, but we work a 8 and 6 schedule, so 8 days on and 6 days off, and then we always have a crossover day, kind of when we're up there together, and that's also a fairly common Forest Service work schedule for remote sites. Because it takes a while to get in and out, obviously. And I love being alone. I've always been a person that's liked being alone, and so it's no problem for me. It's always interesting when they hire new lookouts. You know, either they make it and they come back year after year, or all of a sudden a week later they disappear, and that's it, because they can't stand the isolation.
And you don't, because you don't have, obviously you don't have a cell phone connection up there.
Well, actually, we do have some cell phone connection. It's not very good. We pick up some tower over in Arizona, and it's not very good or consistent. But you can sometimes get calls out.
Okay,
Which I don't know if that's a good thing or not.
Well, tell me about the Gila. I understand it's a very special place in the Southwest. Why is that?
Well, it's the largest wilderness area in the Southwest, and it's really, not only that, but it's really far away from any urban center. I mean, it's 4 or 5 hours to Las Cruces, El Paso, Albuquerque, Tucson. Those are the closest cities, and from any of those, it's 5 to 6 hours probably to get there and get into the Gila. So it's not very heavily traveled. I mean, people come there, but it's such a big wilderness that you can get. What's unique to me is that I can go out on my days off and go out backpacking, which I love to do, and not see anybody. And that's in peak hiking season, which is very different than other wilderness areas I've gone to, in northern New Mexico or Colorado or something like that. It's popular and you see people, and I think that allows you to really feel the wilderness. It was also the first designated wilderness area of a Forest Service wilderness area, and it was designated in 1924, so it's an old wilderness area, and that's kind of unique.
So what does it mean when it's a wilderness? What does that mean?
Well, there's no roads, and there's no motorized access, and there's not even any wheeled access. In many areas, you can't even do a mountain bike there. They don't want mountain bikes. It's just basically on foot or horseback. So that's how an area has to be designated wilderness. It can't have any roads.
So that's why you have to pack in all your gear on
Right.
on mules
Right.
versus you can't. Drive them up there.
Right.
Okay, okay. So, so your job is to sit on this tower and look out into this gorgeous expanse of wilderness. But your job is to look out for fire, correct?
Right, right.
So tell us, what does it look like when you first spot a fire?
Well, fires, when they first start, every fire starts small. It's one snag or one log or one something burning, and they start small, and that's, you know, my job is to detect them early so that a good management decision can then be made about what to do about them. If it's particularly in the Southwest, given its low humidity and winds, if a fire isn't detected early, it gets big fairly quickly, and then that limits what kind of management decision has to be made about it. So the idea is to get them as quickly as possible. So just a little wisp of smoke.
Do you see like red flames in
not when they first start.
No,
It's usually just some white smoke. The trickiest thing is to when we get lightning and rain, to distinguish between a smoke from a fire and clouds from rain that come up. And so and those are called water dogs. That's just kind of a common term for rain clouds that look like smokes, but they're not. So that's something that you have to learn as a lookout, to distinguish between what's a smoke and what is not a smoke, because at the beginning they're small and not very, but you know where to look. After a lightning storm, of course, you look heavily where you've seen the lightning, so that you're guided by the storm, and you know, expect that maybe because there's been a lot of lightning here, there's going to be a fire.
Well, the biggest wildfire happened last year, right in your section around your tower. It was the Whitewater Baldy fire that started last year in May. Tell us about that fire. Did you or your partner spot it?
No.
No.
No, I didn't even get a chance to get up to the tower. It was a fairly early May, sort of a freak thunderstorm in May. That started the Baldy fire, which was just south of the lookout. And I had seen it on the website, didn't think much about it. And I think I started work on May 16th, showed up at work, and by then it had quieted down and then grown again. And they said, no, there's some wind, high winds predicted. We're not going to put you up there until we see what these winds do and what this fire's going to do.
So you never even made it up there to...
Well, I did make it up late June after the fire died down, but I didn't get to get up there. And then that same day that I started work, the Whitewater fire started to the north of there in the headwaters of, up near the headwaters of Whitewater Canyon. And that fire got big fairly quickly. Both of them had wind events. Then they grew together and they became one complex fire and burned a lot of country. And they let me go up to the tower for a couple of weeks in late June. They were probably just tired of me in the office and wanted to get rid of me because I was not a happy camper, not being on my mountains. So, but I did get up for a couple of weeks last year, but it wasn't much of a season.
I see. So the Whitewater Baldy fire was two different fires that merged and made this great big fire. And I think the remarkable thing about that fire was it was the largest in New Mexico's history. It was the largest wildfire. If I recall correctly, it was 300,000 acres, which is like 400 square miles. But it only took about 10% of the overall forest and wilderness area. I mean, can you tell us why this fire grew so big so fast?
Well, partly, I mean, fire is really complex. There's a lot of things that go into how a fire burns and why it burns at certain times. And of course, it has to do with weather and terrain. This being an early spring fire, one thing that, for that high elevation, is that everybody who lives in New Mexico knows about the winds. We have winds, and up at that high elevation, they're stronger than they are even down here in the desert. And while we have a lot of those winds in March and April in the desert areas here in southern New Mexico, in the mountains they tend to come more in late April, May, and maybe early June. And so May can be really, really windy. And what happened with both of these fires was the wind. I mean, we've been in a drought for the last couple of years. Everything's dry, even up at that high elevation where you usually get a snowpack. Now, if we'd had a decent winter, that fire probably wouldn't have done that. It would have just fizzled out. But we didn't have a good winter. You know, those conditions, those winds are just what really drove the fire to get really, really big quickly.
Okay. And so when a fire happens, is the idea is to stop it as fast as you can, or how do you manage wildfires in a place like the Gila?
Well, that's a management decision that happens on each district by the fire management officer in conjunction with the district ranger and certainly the people at the supervisor's office. So there's always a discussion on every fire about how they're going to manage it. And that's changed over time. When I first started 31 years ago working there, there was much more suppression. They were starting to experiment with letting fires burn a little bit because of trying to get back to the natural role that fire plays in the forest, which is to clean it out and regenerate the forest. And
so it can be a good thing, wildfire.
It can be a good thing. It can also be very destructive. I mean, fire, again, is complex, and what management tries to do is figure out, is this going to be a fire that will do some good burning, or is this going to be something, given the conditions and its proximity, say perhaps to what they call urban interface, i.e. people's houses. What are we going to do with this? How are we going to manage it? And so there's always a decision made about how to manage it, and then whether that works out or not, of course, has to do with the weather conditions and the wind and the terrain, and it's always an unpredictable science. But they are trying to let more fires burn and do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, because I think most of us grew up with Smokey the Bear telling us, it's your responsibility to prevent forest fires, and so it always seems like they were a bad thing, right? But can you tell us more about what function fire serves in the wilderness?
Well, fire's always been a part of the natural environment. It was basically in about, I think it was 1910, when there was a huge fire in Montana, Idaho, Washington State. It burned like 3 million acres. It was just huge, and that was right at about the beginning of the Forest Service. And so those two things kind of came together to sort of create this concept that we've got to suppress fires. And that was basically what was done. And that was when fire lookouts started, by the way. They started putting people up I think Baldy was first staffed in 1912 or 1913. And so, that was the concept, was that we had to suppress fires because they were destructive and dangerous, which they are. Not really understanding the science of what role fire can play in the natural environment. By suppression, we actually created more of a problem, because fire, of course, will clean out the dead stuff that's on the ground, regenerate the forest, let new undergrowth come up, get rid of old trees and snags, and all of that, and make for a much healthier forest. Again, it's part of the natural environment. But because we suppressed, we now have kind of created a situation where the fuel loading is much higher than it should be. And so when we have these fires, they can be certainly more destructive, burn hotter, and do more damage. So it's always this trying to find this balance with fire, and it's hard because it's unpredictable.
I see. Well, I understand last year's fire dramatically changed your mountain. I think we have some photos of the before and after, right, that are pretty dramatic. So before, what did your mountain tell us about your mountain? I think we have it up now.
Well, I had before, I had, especially this view is looking out west from the tower into the area that burned, and it was, you know, heavily forested except for some areas where there had been fire, but basically it was heavily forested. I've read some studies on the forest in that particular area where they've been doing some study for trying to understand fire history, particularly in the spruce fir, which is the stuff that grows up in the high country there. And there hadn't been a fire there in some areas. Some of those old spruce were dated to 1700.
Wow.
And so that was a real ancient old growth forest in some areas. There were also areas where aspen had come in that they had dated a fire in about 1904 that had taken out some, done some stand replacement, and aspen had come in, so some of the older aspen groves. So that was kind of an interesting study that I read on you know, just that particular area. So it was an old growth forest. It hadn't burned in a long time, except for, you know, areas there had been fire in there. And then the whitewater balding came and just took it all out.
So let's take a look at the after photo and just see how dramatically different your view is now. And so I understand, though, there is still some growth that's happening, right? Even after this.
I mean, this was actually taken last year when I was up there, so that was pretty close after the fire, and it took out, it's what's called stand replacement. It took out everything, nothing but black dead trees. But amazingly, this year when I've been hiking up and down the trail, in areas where there were aspen, there's tons of aspen coming in. Some of the aspen are even up to my shoulder already. So there's quite a regeneration in areas where there were aspen. Now, areas where there were just spruce fir aren't quite as coming in quite as lush. There's some grasses coming in and some forbs coming in. Wildflowers will come in. And this photo that's actually my mountain and some flowers, and that was taken right after the fire. So the nature has an amazing ability to regenerate, and of course the charcoal and the ash from the fire is very nutritious to new growth, and aspen have a very symbiotic relationship because they grow by roots. So they don't even need seed to regenerate. And so they like fire, and they come in after fire. So in the high elevation, I've been pleasantly surprised by the amount of growth coming in, although of course I still miss my old growth firs that I was and spruce that I was attached to after so many years, you know. But that's a very personal response, right, which I try to allow myself my own personal feelings, places that I went to that are now burned and that I miss and I'm sad about. You know, balance that with understanding the science of fire ecology, which is, you know, important to understand. So,
well, let's talk about that emotional connection to the land, especially since you've been there for 31 years now. What keeps you going back, and how has this job changed who you are, become a part of who you are?
Well, you know, I was a young woman when I started working there, and now I'm an older woman. I mean, I've grown, you know, 31 years. I've grown from a young adult to, you know, almost near retirement age, and that's a huge span of my life. And so I've seen a lot of changes. But every summer, this has been some place where I've gone, and I think it's kind of like the aspen. I get to regenerate every summer. You know, it's peaceful. It's beautiful. I've always had a strong sense of place and a real love of the land, and so this is some place where I can go that just feels like home to me. I mean, I'm gone all winter, I let it go, but every time I come back in the summer, it's just like I'm right there, and it's home, and it feels so familiar, and it's just some place where I can recharge and where I'm very, very connected to. I mean, I know so many places there that are very, very special to me.
So for people that have maybe never considered the Gila to visit, or have never, or don't know much about it, what do you recommend in terms of first-time visitors? Where to go, what to see?
Well, I always think that one of the things that's really special about the Gila is the beautiful canyons. I mean, that's what the Southwest is known for, and the Gila is no different. And I think that the main fork, there's a couple of forks of the Gila River, the Middle Fork and the West Fork of the Gila River, both of which have their headwaters up in the Mogollon Mountains where I work. And those are beautiful, you know, to go and just explore the beautiful rock and the water. And, you know, we're all kind of water starved here in the Southwest, so any place where you can get, you know, someplace that's got running water, I think is really a healing thing. And so that's what I always think is important, because that's kind of the heart of the Gila, is those beautiful canyons.
And so, is there, with all these fire, with all this fire, right? With last year's fire and this year's fire that's going, I think the fire that burned last year is 4 times larger than the silver fire that's going on right now. Is there still wilderness and forest for people to enjoy?
Well, yeah, it's a big wilderness area. I mean, the Gila wilderness is about 500,000 acres, and the Aldo's smaller. I don't have that. That's on the eastern side of the forest, but it's smaller. I think maybe 250,000 or something. I might be off on that a little bit. But so those 2 wilderness areas, there's still a lot of country. There has been a lot of fire, and there's a lot of areas that are burned. It always makes sense if people want to go visit, particularly up in the high country or in some of the canyons that have burned. You know, you have to get information and find out, you know, whether there's been a fire in there, and, you know, not that some of the areas that have had fire are fine, because a lot of it's just been a real, you know, mellow fire where it burns the ground, but some areas have been pretty severely impacted, and that's not always the most pleasant hiking experience, to go where there's no, you know, canopy, and it's, you know, kind of burned out. So you just have to, but there's plenty of places to still go in the Gila. I've been trying this summer to find some myself, considering, you know, the area. I probably have to walk 6 to 7 miles now to get out of the burn in any direction to find some place to hike.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, Sara, and sharing your experience. It was really great to have you. And to all you, thank you for watching. This has been Fronteras, A Changing America, and I'm Mónica Ortiz Uribe. Until next time.